You know, it's actually hard to remember a time when I wasn't constantly thinking about my Pepco meter. But in December of 2023, December 12th, 2023, in fact, I noticed while I was outside in my yard that my meter wasn't displaying the right display. I mean, this is clearly a bad display, but I took a picture and I came inside, and I don't know if I confirmed then or shortly thereafter, but I made sure that Pepco was billing me based on actual meter readings. It wasn't estimated billing. And so I never imagined that Pepco could actually falsify the meter readings in its favor. I just didn't know because, I mean, I'm of a certain age where I have been, I mean, my gosh, what, 30 years of paying utility bills? And the only time that you, or at least I, thought about my utility bills was if something was estimated. And then I would wait to see if it trued up or not because, right, like there's a meter. And so if the reading is off from an estimation, they'll eventually catch up, right? No, wrong, actually. And I didn't know this. And so everybody out there should protect themselves because Pepco doesn't true up anything. It actually overwrites the data stored in the memory of its meters. I had no idea that this was even possible, which is crazy considering the fact that, that I'm an electrical and computer engineer and I spent an entire career in patent litigation, particularly in administrative law proceedings. But I didn't know, and until you know, you don't know. So on December 12th, 2023, which is funny because on December 12th, 2024, the DC Public Service Commission tested my meter, and then on December 12th, 2025 is when OPC submitted a brief sandbagging my case. So December 12th seems to be an important day in my life, I guess, because I know for a fact what I was doing for the last 3 December 12ths. And they all have to do with Pepco. I don't know if anybody else can say that about their Pepco information or not, but it's pretty ridiculous. Anyway, so I didn't think this was a big deal, right? Because I'm getting billed, and so here's my first bill when we moved back into the house in July of 2023. And you can see here it says that my meter records electric energy use in hourly intervals. So that's the amount of energy that like you've used from noon to 1 p.m. or whatever. But those totals for the 24-hour period have to add up to the difference between the midnight reads. So from midnight last night to midnight tonight, the 24 hours in between, they should all, it should just match because that's how math works. It's how electricity works. It's how metering works. And if you're not fraudulently billing your customers, that's what happens. But I didn't know. And now I do, and I'm warning you. So if those numbers don't match, that means that Pepco is fraudulently billing you because they should always match, right? So anyway, I thought that these hourly intervals wasn't a big deal, right? And then it says that the meter readings are provided for informational purposes only. Now, Pepco's attorney, well, actually, Pepco Holdings Inc.'s assistant general counsel, Kunle Adeyemo, says that something about me not being accurate and calling these informational purpose. I don't even know what he was saying, but they're for informational purposes only. And you want to know why? Because that gives Pepco an out if they don't bill you accurately, because look, it says informational purposes only. So if something's wrong, they have an excuse. It's very, very convenient for Pepco. So I'm going to stop this video right now because this is the beginning of, the end. Oh wait, here, let's look. This is, here we go. This is on May 18th, 2024. And see, it's the same meter number. Oh, also, if you note this over here, see that 0211? That 0211 means that this meter was manufactured in February of 2011. What else can we tell from it here? It's a 240 volt, which means that it has a 120 line and another 120 line coming into the house, which is normal for residential service. I didn't know any of this before. Before I devoted my life to Pepco billing fraud. And I don't know what this 3W is. That's weird that I don't know that. But this FM2S, that's a Form 2S, which is that's a residential meter, which means that it has two 120 volt lines coming in. KT 1.0, that means that when the commission tests your meter, KT 1.0 means that for every it's 1 watt hour is 1 pulse on the meter. Okay? And this KH is sort of a weird thing that took me a little while to figure out and make sense in my own brain. But KH is, if any of you are as old as me and you remember meters before they were digital, there were electromechanical, so they had little dials in them, and sometimes you would get your bill and you would look at it and there was the dials moved whatever, but the littlest dial was 10 watt hours. So if that was partially moved, they would round up, right? So if it was, the meter said 1183, because the KH is 10, they round it to the nearest 10th multiplier. So, I think I said 1183. So 1183 would be 1180, and if it's 1188, they would round up to 1190. And that is, the meter just measures the amount of electricity that passes through it. It's like a gas pump, right? So if you pump 10 gallons of gas, you should get charged for 10 gallons of gas. And if you use I don't know, if they round up to the 10 cents or whatever, but really you're not going to get charged for 15 gallons of gas if you only pumped 10. Except that's what Pepco is doing now with its meters. But we'll get there later. And then also, the crazy thing about these meters is that you can program the display. Now, I don't know if you could program the display on this 2011 model of the meter or not, but I can tell you that, let's see, here we go. The new meter that I have, that they put in on this is May 21st, 2024 at 12:01 p.m. at 26 seconds. You can see that this meter is the You know, it's also an I-210+c, same as over here, but back then GE owned the company and now it's Aclara. That shouldn't make a difference. This though does say 6.0, right? And this is January 2024 is that date. Over here it's February 2011. The 6.0 on this means that Pepco is using a firmware version 6.0. And I don't know if you've ever had a firmware update on your phone, or you go to use your smart TV and it says it needs to update the firmware. Firmware is, it's like the layer in between the physical device and the software. So it's sort of like the programming to tell the device what to do, like at a more fundamental level. And so by updating this meter to 6.0 compared to the old meter, which I would assume didn't even have firmware or was an early version, I don't know. It's basically a different meter. Like, you have so many more capabilities in a firmware 6.0 meter than you did in a earlier meter. And we can look at that later because even the Aclara manual for the meter here actually talks about the differences between, I think it's like version 3 of the firmware and after version 3, and the different capabilities with the number of channels that it can monitor and all this stuff, which I had no idea even existed, because to me, it's like, okay, like, it's a meter and there's resistance and energy and volts and watts, and I mean, it's physics, right? It's physics. And if everybody's doing everything according to the laws of physics, it all adds up. But by manipulating the firmware 6.0 capabilities, Pepco is able to unlock some cheat codes so that they can actually bill you for more usage than you're actually using according to the electric use measured by your meter, which is just insane. But let's just really quickly look here. Okay, so we get 60 hertz, TA30, TA30, those are the same. KH10.0, KH10.0, KT1.0, KT1.0. They're both form 2S meters. It's weird because I think like the same soft switches, these are all soft switches, but I don't know how you could tell if they're actually implemented or not. But see, this old meter was a Pepco meter. This new meter is a PHI meter because that's after the Exelon merger, when Exelon just started profiteering and stealing from us, and or robbing us. It depends on whether you are a net energy metering customer or not. But it's interesting because this right here, you can see EOI, that means end of interval. And I have lots of pictures of my meter, so I know for a fact that my end of interval is every 15 minutes. Pepco says that it records hourly intervals. It's actually using 15-minute intervals, which in the abstract is an okay thing, right? Because they're saying, oh, well, we need this to monitor the network and the load and the balance and make sure everything's going according to plan. But that's not what they're using it for. They're using those 15-minute intervals to inflate the billing. And we'll talk about that later. But also, okay, so here's your arrows. Now, as you can see over here, the arrow is pointing to the right. Pointing to the right means that energy is being delivered to your home. the meters record energy as either delivered to the home or received from the home. And so that's if you have solar panels, it would be received from your side, and your side of the meter is called the load. So are they delivering the load or are they receiving from the load? And it took me forever to figure all of this out. So I hope that this is helpful to other people because it took a lot of work. But these up and down arrows. So if the arrow is going to the left means that you're sending energy, excess generation from your solar panels back to Pepco. Okay. Now the up and down arrows, those have to do with this very complicated thing called I think Aclara calls it quadragy or something, but there are 4 quadrants, right? So you have the X and Y axis here, and a normal meter for residential service, it would just be delivered kilowatt hours or received kilowatt hours. Now, when you have a commercial installation, you can have these different things that affect the it's really complicated. So I'm not going to go into it, but suffice it to say that it puts you into these 4 quadrants, right? And so are you, like, if it is a down arrow, then I think down arrow is lagging. So down arrow, there's 4 quadrants. So if it's going this way, it's lagging going to Pepco, or it's lagging incoming from Pepco. And then up arrow is leading going to Pepco, or leading coming from Pepco. And I might have the leading and lagging backwards, and I apologize for that, but I'm just talking on the fly. And when Pepco first answered my question about this, it actually said that the up and down arrows were about delivered and received energy. So even Pepco can't tell the truth about this. I'm trying to be honest, unlike them. So you can see here, all this arrow things, and then this A, B, C, D. I can't remember what A is, but that's normal stuff. And so that's basically the display of the meter. And yeah, let's see. How long did I go? Oh, 18 minutes. All right. Well, then let's just very quickly, look at the Aclara meter manual, because this is the Aclara I-210+c electronic meter user manual. I downloaded this in November 2024, before Pepco tested my meter. The commission tested my meter. It was a supervised, refereed meter test. And the reason I studied my meter was because Pepco, for example, my complaint was based on the fact that Pepco had siphoned off 1,000 kilowatt hours of excess generation I had sent back to its grid in the first 2 months after it issued authorization to operate my solar panels. And so I think that August 2024, I have the downloaded data before they processed the bill from my account at Pepco.com, and it was I had sent 538 kilowatt hours back to Pepco. When they processed the bill, they took that interval data, the hourly, you use this much an hour, blah, blah, blah. They, for some reason, sent an interval restart to make that 538 kilowatt hour credit convert to 54 kilowatt hours of credit. And so it wasn't just that they reduced all of the readings by a decimal place to reduce it by a factor of 10. They actually replaced every single meter reading for every hour of the entire billing period with a repeating pattern that repeated every 168 hours, and that's 7 days. So I think the billing period was 30 days, so it was 168 hours, 168 hours, 168 hours, 4 times. And then the last 2 days were repeats of the first 2 days of that 168 hour pattern, which when I noticed, when I discovered it in the data, I thought this was like some software problem, right? Because Pepco had received the data from the meter. Like, it wasn't a meter problem. My meter's, sorry, I'm pointing over here because my meter's right there. But it wasn't a problem from a meter. Pepco had well, when I say right, it had data totaling 538, right? And so on Pepco's side, when it was processing the bill in its software systems, it replaced the data and issued a falsified bill. They did that again in September 2024. So I think that was, I didn't download the original data, but they gave me credit for 50 kilowatt hours. Eventually, they did credit me with 500. So I was completely right the whole time about this factor of 10 thing. But before Pepco fixed it, the first thing they did 2 days after I filed my complaint with the DC Public Service Commission was that Pepco took my July bill, which finally Pepco produced the recordings of at least those calls, and it proves that I spoke with them and they confirmed that I had a 145 kilowatt hour credit. It confirms that they knew that my solar panels were active and sending energy back to the grid on June 25th, 2024. My electrical inspection wasn't until July 11th. The calls show that I asked about this because I said, hey, my meter's going backwards already, and my installer told me it would take 10 days. So I just want to make sure everything's, in order. And they confirmed it was. And so I looked at my contract. My contract said that June 28th was the estimated commissioning date. So I thought, okay, I'm just a few days early. They told me on July 24th, 2024, that I actually asked, I said, do I have to worry about anything? Is everything taken care of? I dotted my I's, I crossed my T's. They even told me, Pepco's customer service told me that I would get solar renewable energy credits, SRECs, going back to the date of installation. And now, between June 24th and July 24th, my solar generated 2.5 megawatts. So that's, 2.5 SRECs at $400 a piece. They assured me I was going to get credit for it. Everything was fine. But then once I filed a complaint with the commission, Pepco used the fact that my system was turned on, whatever that means, before ATO, authorization to operate, to blame me for its failure to meter my account. Like, it's a meter, right? Numbers, data, know why. Pepco does. And it's just so amazing that they can do this. And I'm going to keep talking because why not? So when I actually, that's the reason that I called Pepco to tell them about my meter display being bad. And as much as I hate to be in public, I don't want to be on camera. I hate all of this, but there's nothing else I can do because I don't have a choice, right? It's either tell you what's happening and let the public know, or I accept Pepco's fraudulent billing for the rest of my life, while the DC Public Service Commission, the Office of the People's Counsel, and even the DC Council railroads me. Charles Allen, who's a council member for Ward 6, was recently appointed as, well, I guess, I don't know if they transferred the DC Public Service Commission and Office of People's Counsel to something he already had, or whether it was because McDuffie retired to run for mayor. I don't know, whatever, but all I know is that this is the first year he's been in charge. And I raised this with him on February 27th when I testified. He promised me that he would ask the government witnesses when they testified on March 5th, which is the same day that the rate case for the rate increase for 2024 to 2026 in formal case 1176 issued that morning. He promised he would ask about my case, and then he didn't. And it's amazing because since then, I've tried to reach out a number of times, and they just ignore me, which is pretty much what Pepco's done this whole time. And the commission and the Office of the People's Counsel, when they realized that I was not going to just listen to their nonsense and wanted answers, because math, numbers, these are like real things. So if one says 20, the other should say 20. There's no I don't understand how any of this could be an issue. Even the supervisor of Pepco's energy engineers, Dave Tendrecki. I apologize, Dave. When I spoke with Pepco, they were ordered to meet with me on April 22nd, 2025, which was the third time Pepco had spoken with me, all of which were ordered by the commission because they refused to actually address the issues on my account. But he said that the numbers should add up, and if they don't, I should call Pepco, because I just wanted to know. I actually filed a petition for a formal hearing because I wanted to be able to verify the accuracy of the meter readings on my bill and to make sure that I was being billed accurately for the electric usage that it's a meter. I mean, I don't understand why this is such a controversial thing for Pepco to actually bill customers based on meter readings, but it is for some reason. And I'm going to guess it has to do with billing fraud, because if they weren't manipulating things, everything would add up and nobody would ever have a problem. And I'm going to talk to you all about that a little more later, with some tips and tricks on how to protect yourself, because they're never going to tell you, and apparently nobody else in the DC government will either. So it's like me or you have to accept fraudulent billing. So I'd rather help you, even though I'm not being paid for any of this. because I just think that's the right thing to do. So anyway, so on Saturday, like the Saturday, May 18th, 2024, sorry, that was my son, he just scared me. At 12:39 p.m., I got a confirmation message from Pepco because I had reported that my meter display was bad. Now, that was Saturday, so the 19th was Sunday, the 20th, here we go, Monday. I get an email from Ms. MacArthur at Pepco that says, after a review of the account, it appears to be a meter issue, and that a request has been submitted to exchange the meter. Now, Pepco hasn't done anything in my favor promptly, ever. But Pepco was here the next day on May 21st. First thing in the morning, and they swapped my meter. Pepco did not pull a final meter reading from that meter. They just yanked it and it disappeared. Why? Maybe because it would have proved that they were not accurately billing me, but we can never know because Pepco destroyed the evidence. And so the reason that I had called or sent this message on May 18th was because I was seriously considering solar. And I learned that our house had a great roof, perfectly positioned row house on Capitol Hill with enough space to offset 140% of our annual usage. That's load, so the annual load. And I crunched the numbers and it made sense given the SREC prices, given the terms and conditions of Pepco's reimbursements for excess generation and the federal credit that was applicable at the time of 30% tax credit. I could pay for my solar system in like 3 years. So I was very tuned into what was going on. And because my meter was not functioning before, I wanted to make sure that my meter was, I didn't actually know that there was a difference in the meters, but I wanted to make sure that I could see the reading to make sure that I knew that I was getting the energy back that I was expecting. So I ended up working with Revolution Solar. And so this is on Friday the 24th. I sent him pictures of my new roof that I had just installed on, I think it was May 4th or 5th. And I asked him for a copy of the standard contract. I wanted to review it because I'm that type of person who reads the fine print. Because I spent too many years in high stakes litigation, and if you do not protect yourself and something's off in the contract, it can be disastrous. And so I just, wanted to make sure everything was in order. So then on the 28th, hey, thanks for sending everything, question about payment terms, blah, blah, blah. I'm ready to sign as soon as you get the, documents over to me. Then, like they said, I'm doing a final review now. What is the PJM EIS consent form at Schedule A? This is the level of detail I spent reviewing this contract. And I'm guessing they are the company that tracks system generation, officially issues SREC certificates so that I can trade them, as opposed to the trading platform itself. Are there competitors to consider? I didn't dig into the fee schedule. I'd like to know my options, especially if it can save on paying unnecessary fees. So I was definitely tuned into every piece of information that I had available to me, right? Well, guess what? Pepco's standard contracts don't comply with their legal obligations under the current commission rules. Why? I don't know. I would suspect it has something to do with their ability to make money and keep things confusing for consumers, because the net energy metering rules changed. I believe it was in 2021, and after that you could go up 20. It was 100% then. You could go up 20% a year, up to 200%. At that same time is when the rules changed, so that instead of Pepco paying you for generation, transmission, and distribution, you just got paid for the generation rate, and it was paid out in December. That change happened in 2021. Pepco is still using their contract. I want to say, is it 2014 contract? I mean, it's old, really old, and they know it. And so their old contract says that they're going to reimburse you at this other rate. And nobody is, okay, well, I can't find it right now. And that's okay, because it doesn't, oh wait, no, I think I do have it up here, because it is attached. See, that's not it. Nope. Oh, here we go. Okay, wait. Because Pepco did attach it to the data request responses that it finally provided in August of 2025, like over a year later. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so the net energy metering contract. This is the final May 2014, and it says that look, it says here that it shall be calculated standard offer of service. This is for generation. Then it says down here that you get full retail rate for transmission and distribution. So that's how I calculated my cost-benefit analysis, because these were the terms of the contract that was provided by Pepco, right? This is not a contract that my solar company or, I didn't draft this. My solar company didn't. Pepco, a Pepco Holdings Inc. company from May 2014, which is, in fact, prior to the merger with Exelon. So I trusted this document. I had no reason not to. On, I think it was like October 17th, 2024. Months and months and months after I signed my contract, and after I had already filed a complaint with the commission because Pepco wasn't, well, we'll get into that later. But suffice it to say that I informed the commission that this was the wrong contract on, it's funny, it's October 22nd, 2024. In May 2025, Pepco actually submitted a new contract, a revised contract, to comply with the legal obligations set forth in the commission's rules. And when I pointed that out, and because I had asked for, the commission rules provide for a waiver where, because Pepco was saying, oh, well, the commission rules say we only pay out at this rate. I'm like, but my contract says more. So, but the rules say there's a waiver provision. And so I tried to invoke that. It's funny because I invoked that in February of 2025. And the commission's hearing officer, Mr. Noel Antonio, is just a gem of a human being and has never been horrible to me. He has never addressed it. He's just sort of ignored that issue. And it's funny because Pepco, even though Pepco submitted a new contract where it says that this contract does not comply with the rules, and it's submitting a new contract that does comply with the rules, which, by the way, for anybody out there watching or listening, means that Pepco fraudulently induced you into entering this contract that it had no intention of honoring after, if you sign a contract after May 2021, or I don't know if it was May 2021, but it was sometime in 2021. And so let's see, here's where it says that I'm going to get credit for NEM starting on 6/28/2024, which is incredible because Pepco, and particularly its very, very cruel and mean Assistant General Counsel of Pepco Holdings, Kunle Adeyemo, he keeps saying that it is my fault that Pepco screwed up my billing because I turned my system on early, and that I was not entitled to any net energy metering credits until authorization to operate issued on July 24th, 2024. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I can read, and it says right here that it says, for the net metering and interconnected operation of the customer's generating equipment and the company's electric system commencing on June 28th, 2024. So, as a customer, and even as a lawyer who's educated and understands these types of things, I read this and I had no reason to believe. I had no way to even suspect that Pepco was going to say, screw you, Rebecca Levinson. You turned on your system early, and you aren't supposed to be interconnected until July 24th, 2024, when we issued authorization to operate your system. I was under the impression that ATO was just simply something I had to do for SRAC credits, particularly given the terms of this contract that Pepco provided and demanded that I enter into. Now, I don't know why. Well, I do know why. Pepco is required to have this standard net energy metering contract, right? And I mean, there is no indication on here whatsoever that this is not a contract that Pepco intends to honor. And you don't get to do that. Like, I'm a lawyer and I'm a good one. And so I know for a fact that this is fraudulent inducement. Now, Pepco Holdings Inc. keeps blaming me. And I don't even know where it is. There's a, so there's like a choice of law clause that's in contracts, which just says, like, you know, if you're signing a contract for your cell service or whatever, it's wherever they want the choice of law to be. Like, it's the New York or the Delaware choice of law. Like, it is specifically saying that this contract will be interpreted under the laws of that state, which just means that these provisions, like if there's if the plain language of the terms aren't clear, well, then you look at the law and you see how that state's laws have interpreted such terms. Again, here, The term of this contract shall commence on 6/28/24. Fine. Okay. And it talks about how much I'm going to get paid back that Pepco had no intention of honoring, and in fact hadn't honored for 3 or 4 years before I even signed this contract that they gave me. Let's see. I can't remember. I'm sure. Government. Assignment, termination, modification. Oh, here. Look at this. This contract is made in accordance with the laws of the District of Columbia and shall be construed and interpreted in accordance with the laws of the District of Columbia. The effective net energy metering rules of the Commission are applicable to this contract. So I signed this and believed, I didn't see anything suspicious with this clause, because it just means that if there's an ambiguity, whatever DC law, however the DC courts have held those ambiguities, like it's just contract interpretation. And and so the statute, well, the regulations the commission has actually have this provision for waiver, which I requested, and I'm the customer, right? And I'm asking for a waiver, which I'm allowed to do because that's what the law says. It says that the contract must comply with the terms of the regulations, and Pepco's contract didn't do that. So here I am going, oh, well, like, I'm a lawyer, so I'll ask for a waiver. Not just thinking I'm the customer and what the heck? Why would they give me this false contract that they have no intention of honoring? So I asked for a waiver. I asked for the waiver at the informal hearing the commission conducted on January 23rd, 2025. And I can tell you right now that there was some woman frantically typing as I'm talking about this specific issue. I watched her on screen. But I didn't think anything of it at the time, right? I'm thinking that maybe they're actually taking me seriously and supposed to do something. But no. In May, they submitted this revised contract that the commission still hasn't entered or accepted. And when I asked my attorney at the Office of the People's Counsel, Stephen Marinsick, when I saw this come in, it was like a week before the brief the hearing officer ordered me to file was due. So it's like the week of like May 23rd or something, 2025. I sent him an email and I was like, oh, Pepco just submitted this. What's up with that? And he reached out to another attorney in the Office of the People's Counsel, Nia Tanner, and she told him, oh, this isn't related to Ms. Levinson's matter. It's been in the works for whatever. Well, I mean, that was in May 2025. I reported the issue in October 2024. My informal hearing was in January 2025. But sure, they independently figured this out. But during the pre-hearing conference in April 2025, Finlay Adeyemo, Assistant General Counsel of Pepco Holdings Inc., said that he would honor the terms of the agreement, of the contracts that I entered. And then all of a sudden, when they put in their frivolous renewed motion to dismiss, after I filed my brief, they all of a sudden came up with this excuse that sorry, I've been talking for like an hour without, 50 minutes. Pepco's defense is that this clause right here that says that the contract is made in accordance with the laws of the District of Columbia and shall be construed and interpreted in accordance with the laws of the District of Columbia. Pepco's position legally is that this clause right here trumps the actual terms of the contract, right? So what are the terms of the contract? Right here, dollar value credit, full generation, and full retail rate for transmission and distribution service. So, I don't expect, non-lawyers to know this. You shouldn't have to know this, but I'm good at explaining things. So, the terms of the contract, the substantive terms like this, right? Like, you're going to pay me this amount of money. You cannot, especially, if it were a customer arguing against Pepco, it might be different, right? But Pepco drafted this contract. They knowingly used a 10-year-old contract because I signed mine in May of 2024. So they knew that this contract did not comply with its legal obligations. They knew that they were never going to pay me this amount of money. Yet they gave me this contract anyway and made me sign it because that's the only way that you can apply for interconnection is to sign these contracts. And then, DC law. DC law requires us to follow the commission's rules, which tell us that we pay out only at the generation rate at the end of the year in December, and therefore I'm the bad guy for asking the commission to enforce the terms of this contract under the provision in the rules that allows me to ask for a waiver. And I would say, in fact, that Pepco's contract does not comply with the rules. So therefore, it is Pepco as the public utility, they should be asking for the waiver, right? Like, why can't they update their contract? It's 10 years old. They knew the rules changed. In fact, after that 2021 rule change, there was a rule change in 22 or 2023 because there was a discrepancy between the standard offer of service and whatever else if you're using another company to for your electric charges, and they wanted to conform them. So not only did Pepco was involved in this rulemaking back in 2021, they went out of their way to update the rules intentionally in 2022 or 2023 to avoid these ambiguities that helped Pepco's bottom line, but Pepco is still using this 10-year-old contract and is still doing so today. So anybody, I signed my contract in May of 2024. Anybody who's entered a contract after that is certainly being fraudulently induced into a contract that Pepco has no intention of ever honoring, which is, you can't do that when you're that's not how it works, except for the fact that Pepco has a monopoly. It is the sole electric utility in the District of Columbia, which means that as long as the DC Public Service Commission and its internal office, known as the Office of the People's Counsel, and the remainder of the DC government are under Pepco's influence and control. You know, Pepco gets to do what it wants, and I'm not okay with that. I think that Pepco should have to pay me pursuant to the terms of its contract, and the commission won't even consider my request for a waiver, even though it was made 13 months ago. The hearing officer just dismissed my complaint because Pepco said so. And that's not how the law works. How the law works and what Pepco does are two very different things, because as long as the DC government is allowing Pepco to get away with it, Pepco thinks that it doesn't have to follow the rules. Now, I know that that is not true, and I know that the DC public, all of us who are paying these ridiculous bills that we will get into later, all of this stuff, we can go to the DC Court of Appeals and ask for something called a writ of mandamus, and that is a court order that would order the DC Public Service Commission to perform its mandatory duties pursuant to DC law. And obviously, nobody has ever gone to that extent before, and I would do it. I've been fighting for 18 months. They're never... I'm going to run out of money before I can keep fighting them, because I'm not being paid to do this. But maybe if we all band together, we can stop it, because nobody in DC government is going to help us. So, yeah, but this is like, this applicable laws clause and their reliance on it, I mean, it could be something on an ethics exam in law school, in your first or second year of law school, because this is so basic of a legal principle that no legitimate attorney, especially because Exelon is a Fortune 200 company. Now, Pepco Holdings Inc. is a subsidiary, but they have the same share. I mean, it's the shareholders, right? So if you buy stock, you are relying on these companies to act within their legal obligations and perform their mandatory legal duties. And the fact that Pepco Holdings can't be bothered to update its contract because it would rather trick the public into believing that it's going to pay a higher rate that it's actually going to pay, that doesn't work. And it's actually there's a duty to shareholders, right? When you're a corporation, you can't just lie to your customers, because that could affect the stock prices. So why is Pepco still using this old contract? Good question. The other thing that's fascinating is that the same time that the change in law went into effect in 2021, there's another part of that law that went into effect, which is the 20% increase over 100% of your, if you use, say you use 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, so that means over 12 months you use 12,000. So back then you could get a solar system that would offset 12,000 kilowatt hours. Well, 20% a year up until 200%, So instead of 12,000, you could do 24,000, right? So that changed over time. But guess what? Pepco's website has not been updated. Pepco's website still says that you can only install 100% of your pre-solar load. So Pepco's website tells you, oh, you can only install a solar system that will offset 12,000 kilowatt hours a year, even though you are legally allowed to install a system that offsets 24,000 kilowatt hours a year. And that discrepancy is a huge deal because of the way that the digital meters work. There's this whole validation, estimation, editing. I'll talk about that later, but suffice it to say that Pepco's estimations and all of its modeling are based on you only being able to do 12,000 kilowatt hours, when in reality you can do 24,000. And that difference is why so many solar customers have huge issues when they interconnect. Because even Pepco's internal employees who are working on this, they believe, because it's on Pepco's website, that it's 100%. If you look at Pepco's website right now, it will say that DC goes to 100%, and it says that Maryland goes to 200%, and then there's like a little like asterisk that says, ask us about why you might not want to go to 200%. I've never clicked on that because it wasn't, well, I mean, it's for Maryland, but why would Pepco still be telling people it's 100% when it was 120% in 2022? Probably because it's more profitable this way. And even if you go onto the solar estimator on Pepco's website where you put in your address and it tells you how many panels you can install and all of that, that calculator is based on 100%. And so the federal tax credit was 30% in 2024 when I installed solar. I think it was 30% after 2022. So I think in 2021 it was 26%. I think that's right. I might have my numbers off just slightly, but guess what? Pepco's estimator on its website still uses this 26% tax credit that hasn't been in effect for 5 years. And not only that, it's still on there now when the big beautiful whatever it is, where Trump just destroyed all the all the solar credits. Like, there is no tax credit now, but Pepco's website still tells people who are looking into solar that that is a credit. I mean, talk about corporate responsibility. I mean, I get it. You guys have a monopoly, but that's a legal monopoly that you have as a matter of law, not as a matter of right. And Pepco has to comply with its legal obligations regardless of what the DC government does. So the DC government could just lay down and let Pepco roll over it. Oh wait, that's what they're doing. But that doesn't change the corporate responsibilities as a public utility. And Exelon knows this. They just don't care. And so they're going to take advantage of us until somebody stops them. And I'm doing it on my own. I've been doing it on my own for 18 months. So I'm hoping that other people will join in this cause because it's ridiculous. Exelon makes well over $2 billion a year in profits. Pepco alone. Pepco is Maryland and DC. I believe it's around 919,000 customers of a total customer base for Exelon of 11 million customers. In 2024, Pepco's profits went up by 27%. They made an additional $84 million in 2024. I don't understand why a public utility, I mean, I get that it's a for-profit public utility, but what would justify a 27% increase in profits? Those go directly to the shareholders. And guess what? They're paid by us, the customers. And it's fascinating because the rate increase that the commission rubber stamped in November of 2024, the month after I filed my consumer complaint, that was an unprecedented $123 million rate increase. And Commissioner Beverly, in his dissent, said that, I'll pull up the language later, but he literally says there's no reason for this other than, quote, because Pepco said so. One of his footnotes says that there's never been, he can't find any evidence anywhere of any other jurisdiction ever approving a forward-looking rate increase. Because guess what? Pepco could submit for reimbursement of these things, but instead, the commission gave Pepco a blank check for $123 million. Now, the DC Court of Appeals just overturned that decision on March 5th, which was a Thursday morning. And that was the day that the DC Council's oversight hearing for DC Public Service Commission and Office of the People's Counsel occurred for the government witnesses. And the DC Court of Appeals vacated and remanded that rate increase. Now, a vacate order means it doesn't exist. Vacate, it's null, it's void. It's like that rate increase never actually happened. And so, immediately after this Court of Appeals decision comes down, Pepco, because they remanded, because guess what? The DC Public Service Commission did not hold a public hearing on this rate increase. They did an administrative style hearing in July 2024, but as far as I never received notice of any of this, and DC law requires notice to the public of rate increases. And so it's weird to me that nobody, I keep asking the Office of the People's Counsel and other people in DC government about this, and I say, well, why didn't anybody check to make sure the public got notified in the first instance? And nobody will answer me. So I'm pretty sure everything was null and void from the outset. But nobody in DC government cares because I don't know. I've never seen any agency, I've never seen anybody in DC government work hard to do anything. And they're working really, really, really hard to protect Pepco. Like bending over backwards to the point of, they're like contortionists, right? Like, we'll talk about all of that stuff later, but the things, the lengths that they are going to protect Pepco are just like outrageous. So this order comes down and it says, you didn't hold a hearing. There was, I think the Office of the People's Counsel had their own expert Pepco had an expert, and there was a question about the justification for the numbers. And instead of holding a hearing, the commissioners decided to just push it through this administrative process, which the Court of Appeals said that's a no-no. And it's crazy because I think it's a 22-page order. On the final page of the order, right before the conclusion paragraph, it's like the last sentence, and it says that even if there had been a hearing, this would have been remanded because there was no justification. Like, the Court of Appeals literally had no way to determine whether this rate increase was just and reasonable, which is what's required under the law. Like, none of those findings were there. So that goes back to the commission on March 5th. And on March 6th, Pepco puts in a motion for an expedited hearing. No public notice, as they're required to by law. They're trying to jam this thing down our throats without anybody knowing, without anybody in the public being aware of what's going on, because they can, and the DC Public Service Commission is under Pepco's control, as is the Office of the People's Counsel, because why wouldn't the Office of the People's Counsel bring this up? That the public notice, public participation was not enforced in the first instance, and in response to my case, back on September 5th, 2025, when the hearing officer said he was not going to hold a hearing in my formal hearing case because Pepco said they fixed everything, and so it was all of a sudden my burden to prove Pepco's billing wrong, even though Pepco couldn't prove that its billing was right. It's like totally crazy. But Lawrence Daniels, who's the director of litigation for OPC, he said on the record that what was happening was the equivalent of a rate case where the commission just approves something on the papers and doesn't hold a hearing. And that was before the Court of Appeals decision. So, of course, after the Court of Appeals decision, I brought this up. But as soon as the Court of Appeals decision was issued, 4 days later, the hearing officer in my formal hearing case just decided that he was going to dismiss it. It's totally crazy. He says that I didn't meet my burden of proof by applying this contested case standard under the Administrative Procedures Act, but that would, of course, require a hearing, so that didn't make sense. And then also, it's a billing complaint based on a meter reading, and Pepco is a public utility, so it literally is legally obligated to read my meter and render bills accordingly. It would be billing fraud for them to do anything else. They've admitted that they did not read my meter and render bills accordingly, but instead of making Pepco prove its billing on my house accurate, the Public Service Commission and even my own attorneys at the Office of the People's Counsel, despite Lawrence Daniels promising at that hearing back in September that he would protect my rights, that he would ensure the brief that I wrote would be answered, that my complaint would be answered, I was being denied due process. But at that conference in September 2025, the hearing officer prevented me from advocating on my own behalf. Because guess what? Pepco can't defend its actions as a matter of law or a matter of fact. And instead of making Pepco perform its legal, they're the can't get anybody else to read my meter. I can't. I can't sue Pepco because that's not how it works. Like, the commission has exclusive jurisdiction, which means that any billing complaint has to go through this consumer complaint process. Pepco was required to resolve my complaint within 14 business days. That would have been in October 2024. But instead, they've been torturing me for the last 18 months. And it is unbelievable what has occurred. And I can't wait to tell you all about it later. But it is, to me, ridiculous that even before any of this stuff with my account happened, Pepco gave me a contract that I had to sign in order to apply. Like, in order to, like, install solar panels, I had to sign this contract. And they were never going to honor it. And so, what? The what? I did not know at the time. I learned much later, way much later. So this is the Interconnection application and agreement. Now, the commission rules changed. This one might be 2022, but might be 2021. I think it's 2022. So, I don't know, anybody out there with solar, do you know that you have something called smart inverters? So the inverters on your solar panels, it's like I have 40 panels. There are 40 inverters. And then those things all get routed through this Enphase box that I have. And then there's a inverter-based revenue grade generation equipment or something. It's in the DC regulations for the commission passed, and it talks about how, you know, these are the inverters and it goes to this thing and it's going to do this. But in 2022, apparently it happened. The commission passed new regulations about these things called smart inverters. And one of the biggest things about the smart inverters is that they have this thing called anti-islanding. So if the power goes out in my neighborhood, right, it's the middle of the day, my solar panels have to shut off, because what if somebody comes out to work on the line from Pepco? Like, they don't want to get electrocuted, right? So my system has to shut down. Everybody, this is just how it works, right? So your system has to shut down, and it's, there's like so many seconds that it has to happen within, and Pepco relies on that, right? Like, it's not anything in their meter that stops you from exporting solar. It is literally your own equipment that protects Pepco's employees, the linemen and women who are out there working on lines when a power failure occurs. And so what Pepco has done is, so there's this anti-islanding feature, and then there are some other things. One of them is called a volt-var curve. And so what that means is that if the power, right, like, so your neighborhood, if, you know, we have 50 homes that have solar in the middle of the day, if it produces too much energy that overloads the system, this volt-var setting will actually make your inverters stop. It's like it curtails your power that you're exporting. So Pepco is able to manipulate these things. And the rules, not new rules for the last 4 years have said that those settings must be included in your interconnection agreement. And Pepco hasn't put them in there yet. And I clearly spent a lot of time on this, as you could probably tell, since I have now been talking for an hour and 20 minutes on this. Oh my gosh. I haven't even gotten past May. Wow. Anyway, so I did not know. I signed my contract in May 2024. In January 2025, Margaret Moskowitz in the Office of Consumer Services at the Public Service Commission mentioned to me that the commission had instituted like a new something with respect to its formal case 1050, which is the interconnection standards in the District of Columbia. And I'm looking at it back then and I'm like, huh? This doesn't seem to be anything related to anything about my case. But guess what? I didn't even know that I had smart inverters. I did not understand the applicability. And nobody will tell me what inverter settings I am required to use. Like, it's crazy. I'll pull it up. Oh, wait. Is it right here? Oh, no. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. I asked, this is, well, we'll talk about how horrible Pepco is later. This is in, they sent this on November 4th. I did not get it until last week on the 16th because the Office of the People's Counsel withheld it from me. And incredibly, so at the September 5th, 2025 follow-up conference, because the hearing officer is so corrupt he won't hold a formal hearing, and made me go through a second. There's a pre-hearing conference where I was ordered to file a brief because Pepco said they fixed the problems. So I filed a brief. OPC, my attorneys did not help me. They didn't even talk to me about it, so I had to do it all on my own. And I guess nobody actually expected me to do that, because then when Pepco couldn't answer my brief, they basically all colluded, and at the September 5th, 2025 conference, the hearing officer said I'm not allowed to participate anymore in my own case, and I had to go through OPC for everything. Then when OPC Lawrence Daniels, the director of litigation, got mad because I refused to settle for $1,000. I want an accurate bill. I don't want money. I want an accurate bill. I'm entitled to an accurate bill based on actual meter reading. I don't know why he would try to force me to settle for $1,000, but he'd get really mad when I refused. And then he just stopped talking to me and worked with Pepco to basically railroad me. But at the September 5th follow-up conference, Mr. Adayamo, the Assistant General Counsel for Pepco Holdings Inc., and the hearing officer, Mr. Noel Antonio, who is an attorney in the General Counsel's Office at the Commission, they decided together that none of the issues that I had raised in my complaint that was filed 7 months earlier were anything that the hearing officer could decide. My complaint, literally, the requested relief, the first requested relief is a way to verify the accuracy of my Pepco bills. And Mr. Adelmo and Mr. Antonio decided that that is not something that the commission can give me, even though it's like literally within the rules. But they just decided to, make up their own rules because it's more profitable for Pepco that way. And that's all that matters. But you would think that, I'm a customer. The Office of the People's Counsel was supposed to help me with my original complaint. After 5 months of being tortured in mediation purgatory, but they didn't. So I wrote my own complaint. It was, 18 or 20 pages, but then had, I think, 44 exhibits. So it's 368 pages total of proof tied to violations of the Utility Consumer Bill of Rights, this net energy metering contract issue, pre-solar issues with my billing. But then 7 months later, all of a sudden they decide, oh, we can't do anything with your case. And I don't know why they would have wasted my time for 7 months. I mean, the Office of Consumer Services, 2 days after I filed my complaint in October 2024, Pepco issued fraudulent billing. And when I told the Office of Consumer Services what had happened, that they made the problem worse and didn't fix anything in my complaint, Mr. Aaron Ayler, who is in the Office of Consumer Services, told me, oh, Ms. Levinson, you're going to need a formal hearing and you need to document everything at an 8th grade level. So I didn't know that wasn't the case. And so I started documenting things then. I even created a PowerPoint and sent Pepco PowerPoint on October 11th, 2024, detailing how its revised billing did not correct the problem, made the problem worse, and also detailed all of the errors in Pepco's billing for August and September 2024 that were detailed in my original complaint. So I don't know why anybody would have told me in October 2024 that I was definitely going to go to a formal hearing. I ended up talking to the Office of the People's Counsel that month as well. I talked to Pam Nelson, and in fact, she pulled in Lawrence Daniels on the call, and I spoke with them on November 18th, 2024. And again, the same, oh, nobody can do anything to help you now. We have to get to the formal hearing process, then we can represent you. You'll be entitled to legal representation. The Office of Consumer Services, and it is correct, right? The way that the regulations are written, the Office of Consumer Services has no authority to make Pepco follow the law, but Pepco isn't following the law because the commission doesn't care. So the way it plays out for people who aren't as crazy as me is that you, well, in my case, they were taking 90% of my excess generation, and if I had not kept fighting, Pepco would still be doing that today. But I did keep fighting, and I finally got that 90% back. But they exposed some other serious, egregious issues with their billing. These like digital footprints everywhere that prove what's going on, and so they finally fixed that in November. But Aaron Ayler in the Office of Consumer Services and Pepco, both of them, withheld the responses that Pepco provided in October and November of 2024. So I didn't know. I did not get those responses until I think it was December 9th, after I escalated my complaint to Margaret Moskowitz in the Office of Consumer Services. And from what I can tell, it just seems like the plan was for the commission to test my meter. And if I kept complaining, the commission was just going to replace my meter, which gives Pepco a mulligan, right? They get a fresh start. The meter starts at 0 again, so when their math is off, they get to square everything up. But I didn't let them do that because I read the meter manual and I knew better. And so, like, this whole thing has been this just insane misdirection, misinformation campaign. I mean, I have a meter. I'm a resident of the District of Columbia. Pepco is the exclusive electric utility. They are required legally to read my meter and render bills accordingly to the meter readings. They're not doing that. And the DC government and Pepco Holdings Inc, excellent. They've all wasted my time for the last 18 months. And if I didn't go through the extraordinary effort of learning WordPress and creating a website and learning OBS and this thing called Whisper to transcribe my audio, and I don't even know what else I had to learn. But if I don't even do social media really. Like I have a Facebook account, but that was it. But I created still can't call it X because that's just weird, but the Twitter, which I have been against forever. I've never had a Twitter account or an X account, but I created one so that I could try to get Council Member Allen's attention when he questioned the Public Service Commission and the Office of the People's Counsel on March 5th. Nobody ever responded to any of the messages that I sent on Twitter, but they are there. And so I created a Facebook page, a website, a YouTube account. I am on camera right now talking to you because I think that it's much more effective to see a real person instead of, some like nameless, faceless monster who's just forcing you to comply with, we're gonna pay you at this rate, even though our contract says more. And we're just gonna ignore you when you complain. I mean, that's literally what they're doing. It's crazy because I thought Charles Allen, who is the council member for Ward 6, I thought he was gonna be different, but his office, nobody will respond to anything I say. It's crazy. Because, if they just all ignore me and stonewall me long enough, they think I'm gonna go away. They apparently don't know me because I'm gonna take the whole system down. In fact, I actually told that to Stephen Marinsick back in January of 2025 when the Office of the People's Counsel wouldn't help me write my complaint. And so I said something like, while you all hail the billionaires, I'm going to do this on my own. I didn't know that they were actually going to make me do it on my own, but I did. And then when I kept winning and Pepco couldn't answer anything, Pepco had to turn, I don't know if any of you have ever had a lawyer, but can you imagine your own lawyer saying, oh, we're going to take it from here? They actually told me in August that I should relax and I didn't have to do any more work. But it was really because they just wanted me to go away. And they were planning on sandbagging me. But I didn't And so I kept asking questions, and I screwed everything up for them. So now here we are. But anyway, so after this, this September 5th follow-up conference that the hearing officer, I mean, it's weird because, right, like, the Office of the People's Counsel insisted that I attend, and I'm like, but I should have a hearing now. All sorts of weird stuff there, but we'll go into that later. So during that conference, Mr. Adeyemo, who, you know, Pepco did not speak with me. I called them on September 30th to tell them about this billing error, and then they tried to cover it up, but they didn't speak to me until the informal hearing in January, January 23rd, 2025. So they talked to me then. Then Linda Brown and Escalated Investigations called me to confirm I was driving to see my dad in Pittsburgh because he was diagnosed with cancer. And so Pepco wanted to call while I was out of town to probe my meter. It's the only time Pepco's actually reached out to me, which is just so offensive. And my husband put duct tape on the meter, and we made sure they did not touch anything while I was gone. Then Pepco spoke to me at the pre-hearing conference on April 8th, 2025. The hearing officer he insisted that we had to have like these, be prepared to talk about your calculations and stuff. So of course I go in with like a PowerPoint. He wouldn't even let me get through my first slide because he kept cutting me off to say, oh, but Pepco said they fixed it. But Pepco said they fixed it. And then he ordered me to write a brief proving what Pepco owed me within 10 days. It was, I think it was a Tuesday. And I said, sir, next week is spring break. I'm going to be in Florida at Disney World with my family. You know, can we move the deadline? And he said, no, I'm giving you 10 days. Pepco still hasn't even answered the complaint that I filed, that, you know, 20-page complaint with the 300 pages of exhibits. I filed a brief because Mr. Antonio insisted that I had to prove Pepco wrong, so I wrote a brief that said, actually, it's Pepco's burden of proof. And then, because Mr. Antonio was trying to put everything in the solar context, I wrote an entire brief proving that this was not a solar case, that this was actually about Pepco's billing, including my May 2024 bill when Pepco changed my meter without getting a meter reading, and issued a fraudulent bill that it still won't explain and didn't mark it as estimated. And then my June 2024 bill that it estimated pre-solar. So this isn't just like solar billing. So I was like, okay, well, I will say, you know, I will make this clear. And instead of responding to my brief, Pepco filed a frivolous renewed motion to dismiss. Once again, saying I was relying on solar data from my solar system, which I've never relied on. So after that, I asked the office, because the Office of the People's Counsel never explained to me why they didn't write a brief, despite being the fact that I was ordered to do so. I later learned that Pepco had given them a letter on April 29th, a month before the brief was due, that I assumed they had intended to rely on to file a brief as a, you know, pro forma. Oh, she's owed 19 kilowatt hours. But nobody ever told me that. So I was, you know, I spent an entire month drafting it's like maybe one of the best pieces of a work product that I've ever produced because it's just amazing. My husband actually was the one who helped edit it to make sure that it didn't go too far into detail. And the Office of the People's Counsel, my attorneys, didn't even offer to help with my exhibits, with file. I had to register for e-filing. I had to draft a cover letter, a certificate of service. I had to redact things. I filed and served it myself. And then the commission would not put it on the public docket for my own protection. To keep Pepco's secrets is really what they meant. But anyway, so I did all of that, and then after Pepco put in its frivolous renewed motion to dismiss, I called Stephen Maransick at the Office of the People's Counsel, and I said, what's the plan? And he said, oh, it's in the hands of the hearing officer now. And I blew up. I said, what are you even talking about? I mean, they made me file a petition for a formal hearing and a formal hearing complaint simply to enforce my right to an accurate bill based on a verifiable meter reading. I still had not received it. I didn't get the relief, and the Office of the People's Counsel was just going to give up. After I made it clear that I was going to file a ethics complaint against Ms. Madhavu Fry with the DC Bar, the Office of the People's Counsel, they capitulated, and they actually did put in a. It's funny, they didn't call it an opposition; they called it a response because there are patterns in the way and the language and the way things are done at the commission, and nothing is ever an opposition. It's like a token whatever that can be interpreted whatever way they want to make it interpreted because they keep everything off the public record. So they have this response. And then I actually sent, because the rules for formal hearings say that upon reasonable request, the parties shall provide all of the information that's relevant, right? It's like, data, documents, witnesses, all sorts of things, right? So the Office of the People's Counsel wasn't actually acting as my attorneys, and so I had done all the work. I wrote the complaint. I prepared a PowerPoint for the pre-hearing conference that I wasn't allowed to present. I prepared a presentation for the April 22nd meeting with Pepco and its technical staff, where Pepco just listened and didn't give me any information. I wrote this brief by myself, and so what the what? And so I send this email to Mr. Adeyemo, who was the attorney for Pepco, who was handling the matter, and I say that Pepco knows that my complaint is based on actual DC law, actual commission regulations, and Pepco's own data and documents. Pepco can't keep filing frivolous motions to dismiss that are based on nothing more than blatant lies and imaginary laws and facts. This is a legal proceeding. Professionally, I don't use words like lies and imaginary and whatever, right? I would say, oh, this is a material misrepresentation. But if this was a case that I was actually litigating, I would use these words, because this isn't just they're blatant lies. Pepco, my brief says, Pepco's original, they didn't answer my complaint, and they moved to dismiss because they say that I'm relying on data from my solar panels, and I've never relied on that data. And I call that out in my brief, and then guess what? They file a renewed motion to dismiss on the same grounds. I don't even understand. And then it's crazy because after all of this goes around, I even escalate things to Ann Bancroft, the general counsel of Pepco Holdings, in December, and I say, this is not right. I PowerPoint presentation with here's all the billing fraud stuff. OPC is sandbagging me. All of these bad things are happening. And she writes back, oh, well, Mr. Adeyemo is handling the matter. And as you mentioned, you're represented by OPC. Oh, and then on January 5th this year, Mr. Adeyemo submitted a response to OPC's brief where he once again, on behalf of Pepco, argued that I was relying on solar data that doesn't exist. And it's crazy because my brief actually points out that Pepco's answer, none of these things comply with the rules. They're not. Unsworn attorney argument is not evidence. An attorney can't just say, "Oh, we fixed it." It doesn't work that way anywhere other than the DC Public Service Commission. So if you're Pepco, you can just say, "Well, we did this," and everybody's like, "Oh, huzzah, Pepco!" But in the real world, that doesn't fly. And what are they even thinking? I'm a customer, and Pepco has now lied in 3 pleadings, saying that I'm relying on solar data that doesn't exist because I've never relied on it. And then guess what? The hearing officer, Mr. Adeyemo, dismissed my case because I didn't meet my burden of proof with the solar data that I never submitted. I mean, it's just like whatever Pepco says, they rubber stamp, regardless of reality. It's crazy. I didn't know this back then, but so this is back in June, right? So I say, Mr. Adeyemo, blah, blah, blah. And this was like the commission, they wanted me to go to another follow-up conference, and I'm saying, I should have had a hearing last month. Why are we going to do a follow-up conference? So I point out that Pepco had to respond to my brief. They can't just keep, look, I even say, it doesn't address Pepco's unlawful billing prior to my solar system being installed. This is a legal proceeding, which is funny because this still hasn't been addressed, but the hearing officer for the commission, Mr. Antonio, has decided that it doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He's going to dismiss it anyway. I told him Pepco is being abusive. Pepco is enacting in good faith. It isn't fair, and it needs to stop now. I don't know that I could have been any more clear. And then I make my formal request for this information. And I quote the rule. It says, and the rule says shall provide. I don't have that part quoted here, but it does say shall. Shall means you must. It's not optional. Shall. And relevant documents, account data, files, and the names of witnesses. I cite the rule, which is 15 DCMR 325.8. And then the rule says that it's upon reasonable request. So I tie that back in here. This request is indisputably reasonable because Pepco has failed to respond to any issue in my complaint. So this is now June of 2025. My complaint was filed in October of 2024. Pepco was legally required to resolve the issue in October of 2024. I find out a few months after this that Pepco actually Pepco actually manipulated its billing system to cover up what it was doing and try to continue fraudulently overbilling me. But we'll talk about that later. And so, they can't withhold relevant information because they're just like, oh, it's confidential. I used to handle some of the most sensitive, the most important intellectual property in the entire world that has to do with how you, the design on the central processing units and graphics processing units that are the GPUs and CPUs that are in almost every device that everybody uses. And I was responsible for defending that data in patent litigations. And so when you give somebody, you can't just say it's confidential in a litigation, because if you could just do that, you could get away with murder, right? Because, oh, it's confidential. No, you have to produce it. But there are procedures for that. There's a company called Iron Mountain. Sometimes people do these secured locations where everything's under lock and key. A lot of times what we would do would be we would have like a conference room, but it was a standalone computer. There were strict requirements on you can't bring in devices, and you could only have all of these different rules. So I understand the nature of confidential business information, and I know for a fact that Pepco can't just say, oh, we're not going to give you the logs from your meter, and we're not going to give you the settings to the program, how they're programming my meter. Oh, that's confidential, and somebody could corrupt our system if they know how we're cheating you. I don't even know, but I know how this stuff works, and their arguments were nonsense. So I made sure I called that out, and then I said that, look, I insist that you provide at least the following information to the commission and to me prior to the follow-up conference with the commission next week, because this is what the hearing officer wanted to meet the following week. And I say that you cannot withhold relevant information that proves you're lying in your renewed motion to dismiss. In particular, I asked for these phone calls, and I have my cell phone records, so I have like the exact minutes and stuff. This phone call here, they actually gave me the first part of, but then I got transferred to Mr. Honesty, and that is his real name. Mr. Honesty, I assume he's in the Energy Advisory Team, which I thought was GPC before, but the GPC is just the greedy power company bilking department. There's no actual GPC anything. They did give me this voicemail. See, I said Green Power Connection Team, but that was actually the voicemail from Mr. Honesty the next day. This 12-minute call, I have this one. This 19-minute call, Pepco is withholding because it actually proves that they pinged my meter, and that Pepco's billing was fraudulent because they aren't using the meter reading that was given to me on that call. What's fascinating is that I spoke with Pepco at a little while later and discussed that ping to my meter that occurred here. But why would Pepco give me anything? Now, this call on September 30th at 11:17 a.m. was when I called to report the fact that Pepco had replaced my meter readings for August with falsified data to fraudulently inflate my reduce my excess generation credit by 90%. The customer service woman was so very nice. She tried to transfer me to, I guess, what would be the energy advisory team. I couldn't reach them. She put me on hold while she drafted the email. She came back on the call. She spoke to me, she read what she wrote, and she asked me to help her edit it to make sure it was accurate. This 21-minute call, because GPC billing, the greedy power company's billing department, doesn't have an internal phone number. So regardless of how important a customer complaint is, neither Pepco customer service nor the energy advisory team has a way to reach them. They have to email this department, which is awfully convenient for Pepco to avoid its legal obligations. But this call, I can't remember her name. She was very nice, but I can't remember her name. And she said somebody would call me back within 24 hours. And that afternoon, because this was so important, I called back and I talked to this is Ms. Reyes, and she's I guess she's one of the energy advisory people. And she said that she said it would be weeks before somebody from GPC billing, the fictitious department, called me back. I filed because as soon as the September billing period ended, my interval readings on the portal went back to normal magnitude and weren't reduced by a factor of 10. So I knew that when the October bill issued, it would have this same pattern, because like in August and in September, that was what they did. Data was normal, then they just replaced it during the billing process. And I didn't want to wait. Why would I allow this to continue when I knew what was going on? So I called on October 4th. I talked to Ms. Reyes again during this call. Pepco they've withheld these calls. Then I called on October 15th. That call, I spoke with Mr. Honesty again, who is the guy I talked to back in June. Great name. He seems very honest. I'm like Pepco's attorneys. And so I talked to him for 20 minutes because I said to him, hey, they issued revised billing on October 4th, and it made things worse, not better. And he told me that he didn't know if anybody would ever call me back from the greedy power company's billing department. And so I was just shocked. I think that was when I'd already tried to reach out to OPC, but they have this it's crazy. It's almost impossible to reach them, or PSC, but OPC has this great system where when they make an outgoing call and you go to pick it up, it just disconnects. And you can ask Stephen Marensick about it. And even Pamela Nelson, she put in notes in the system that she tried to call me at the end of October, and it just kept disconnecting, and she kept getting voicemail or something. They still haven't fixed that. That was like, a year and a half ago. And then, on this call on October 15th, Mr. Honesty, that's when I said, well, hey, I have this question about my NEM contract. One of my friends said it gets paid out in December, and it's at this rate, and my contract says this other thing. And he says, oh, well, it's something, something commission rules, and it referred me to the commission's website, but there's nothing there. So that was when I started looking into things a little more closely. And one of the things that I saw a discrepancy on, which is like a totally, completely ancillary issue that is irrelevant in the grand scheme of things that had to do with the bill stabilization adjustment, BSA. And so I called on October 21st to ask about that, right? I talked to them for 32 minutes before this agent put me on hold, and then she came back and she said, oh, you have a pending complaint with the DC Public Service Commission. You have to send anything that you want to raise with us through Aaron Ayler. It's in one of the emails that explains exactly what she said. It was ridiculous, but they said they wouldn't talk to me. And then this 4-minute call was when Linda Brown in the Escalated Investigations Department called me when I was driving to Pittsburgh to see my dad, who had just been diagnosed with cancer. And I told her I was on the other line with my friend and said, can I call you back when I get, can we talk when I get to Pittsburgh? And she said it was really important. So I got off the phone with my friend, and then I don't know what was really important, because it was like this whole weird vague call. I said I'm out of town. I thought we agreed that they weren't going to probe my meter, and then I get an email that night from Linda Brown, saying that they were going to probe my meter the next day. So I didn't get that until almost midnight, and then I had to stay up late writing back to her and saying what, because this is the first time anybody had voluntarily called me or spoken with me from Pepco, and it was to try to probe my meter when Pepco knew I was going to be out of town. So all of these were withheld. I still don't have those. Anyway, okay, so that was in on June 19th. Mr. Adeyemo replied the next day or a couple of days later, and he provided the transcript of my April 22nd meeting with Pepco, but he didn't provide anything else, and he said he was working on the rest. Then he, shortly thereafter, started pressing the commission to hold a follow-up conference, despite not producing any of these documents or the calls or whatever. And what's crazy is this call right here, the part where I talked to Mr. Honesty that they've withheld. Pepco actually relied on that. That's the way I know that they record their calls, is because their January 22nd, 2025 written response with some questions that I had submitted in advance of the informal hearing, they referred to that, and they actually said that Pepco did confirm that my system was operable, my net metering was set up, and that my net billing was set up, and that I didn't have anything else that I had to do. So I know that call exists. They're relying on it. They still haven't given it to me, of course, because why would they? They don't have to do anything because the commission doesn't care. So there's a lot of stuff that happened over the summer. A lot of stuff in that, like, posturing stuff where I'm like, I'm not going to go to this meeting. What are you even talking about? I escalated to the higher ups at OPC, and they finally convinced me to meet with, attend this follow-up conference on September 5th. And under the guarantee that it would be recorded and transcribed, because I did not trust the hearing officer, Mr. Antonio, after how horribly he treated me at the April 8th pre-hearing conference. I mean, he's mean, like cruel, mean. I had to go off camera at the end of the pre-hearing conference because I was about to scream at him that it was the Public Service Commission, not the Pepco Service Commission. And so I was just like, I'm gonna go off camera, and I muted myself, went off camera, and I started sobbing. Uncontrollably. Because it was such I did all of this work and he wouldn't even let me speak. Anyway, he did issue an order that said that the September 5th conference would be recorded. He did record it. He was able to generate a Teams transcript, but then he claimed that the audio was blank. I don't know how he could have possibly generated a transcript if there was no audio recorded, but that's what he said. And I'm just the customer who has no rights. So anyway, so during this September 5th conference, Firmware actually says that I said something like what the what? I'm just asking for like a transparent explanation and blah blah blah. And he says that the reason Pepco cannot meet with me is because I will not let them speak. And that's the reason that this has been going on so long, is because me, the customer, won't let Pepco speak. So, in addition to that was when Mr. Adeyemo and Mr. Antonio buddied up and decided that the commission did not have the authority to decide whether or not the billing on my account was accurate, and that I had to prove this is when Pepco decided to change its story and declared all of my billing estimated because it didn't have business records to substantiate what it had actually billed me, and I wanted those records. It couldn't give them, and so, but let's just make something up and railroad the customer. Anyway, so this is October 10th, and so I thank him for clarifying that none of the issues raised in my formal hearing complaint and brief are within the scope of my formal hearing case. I explained that I did not have any assistance drafting either, and I mistakenly believed that the plain language of the commission's rules would apply. Then I sincerely apologized for making Pepco feel like it couldn't sit down and talk with me. When might Pepco be available to meet? I promised to be open-minded and give Pepco the opportunity to speak. And then I brought up these specific points that came up at the pre-hearing conference. One of them was the fact that Pepco is using a multiplier where every pulse recorded by its meter, instead of being 1 watt-hour, it's 1.5 watt-hours. I wanted to understand that. Yes, I said watt here, but it is watt-hour. And then I asked about the advanced inverters, and even the stuff on the website is buried in this contractor section. And then I asked about this solar installation issue and asked about speaking with them. Now, Mr. Adeyemo never responded to me. And on October, I think it was 23rd, I had a call with the Office of the People's Counsel, which I was, had enough, I knew I was getting hosed, so I recorded that call on a call in September just to protect myself, because I knew that everybody was protecting Pepco and not acting on my behalf, even though they were my attorneys. So during this call on October 23rd, Lawrence Daniels, the director of litigation, basically told me that I must have used some electricity, so I had the burden to prove what I used because I had filed the complaint and it was my burden of proof, even though Pepco said that it had no way to prove how much electricity I had used, and I just couldn't understand how, if, I mean, there's a meter, right? So they should true up the billing, and if they can't do that, then how can they bill me anything, right? Because they're the utility and there's a meter, and if they didn't read it, that's their problem, not mine. But Mr. Daniels was clear that it was my job, and he got very mad at me when I did not agree to settle the case for $1,000. And 2 years of monitoring on my account to ensure that the meter readings were accurate. But as I explained to him, if they can't tell me now how to verify the accuracy of those meter readings, how could anybody monitor my account and confirm anything? Because if it's not verifiable, it's not verifiable. And so after that, Mr. Daniels said we would talk again. I never heard from him again. And I did hear from Mr. Marinsek, my attorney, who said that they were going to meet with Pepco at the beginning of November on Wednesday. And he said that they didn't want me on that call. Of course they didn't, because I would have asked hard questions. And they sent me that transcript, and then they put in a motion for an extension of time to file a brief on my behalf, claiming that they needed more time to get information from Pepco about these technical issues. And then they put in a brief where they said that they came up with this proxy model where they used my 2025 billing to approximate what Pepco should have billed me in 2024. It was very, very bizarre. They didn't run any of it by me, and they sort of sprung it on me. Well, they did spring it on me. I think the brief was filed on December 12th. I want to say the 9th. It was like Tuesday of that week. It was way too late for me to do anything to fix it because, they didn't give me the time. The brief was actually originally due on November 17th, and on the 14th. On November 14th is when they put in the motion for an extension of time. They didn't talk to me about that either, but they represented in that motion that they were working on these technical issues with Pepco, so I believe them. And this transcript, I did eventually get this transcript, but that's all I got. And then so last week I followed up because I was reviewing the transcript, and I said, wait a minute, this is referring to something that makes it sound like Pepco gave answers to something. So I asked Stephen Marinsek, and he forwarded this email that you're looking at here. And here's what's fascinating. So when I talked to Mr. Daniels and OPC on October 23rd, Mr. Daniels referenced a response that Pepco had, an email Pepco had sent on October 17th. And I commented, I said, I didn't get that. I don't know, what are you talking about? And it's funny because this Friday, October 10th, I was actually in Florida on vacation with my family. We were with my best friend, the one I was talking to actually when why can I say her name? Linda Brown called to try to schedule probing my meter when she knew I'd be out of town because my dad had cancer. I was on Friday, October 10th at 8:41 a.m. I was literally stepping onto a boat to go fishing. And so that's why this has this weird formatting with these numbers because I was using my phone. And this is how, important this all is to me. But look at this. So the following Friday, Mr. Adeyemo, Pepco Holdings Inc.'s Assistant General Counsel, with the express approval verified of Ms. Anna Bancroft, the General Counsel, sent this to Stephen Marisek, my lawyer, and Mr. Daniels, who's the director of litigation, and he says he's looking into this. He's not sure if it's an official request or not. I don't know what that would have to do with anything. But he says the same issues with the other TR requests is still present. I don't know what that means. Pepco is willing to work with OPC, but I have to be cognizant of the scope of these requests and how much resources they are marshaling. I'm asking for a way to verify the accuracy of Pepco's billing. And that is apparently marshaling too many resources for Exelon to provide an accurate bill. That is the most utterly insane thing I think I have ever. Actually, it is. I have never seen something. I mean, I've litigated against patent trolls. I've seen all sorts of stuff. But Exelon thinks it's too much work and too expensive to verify the accuracy of my bills. How is that possible? I mean, they have to bill me based on a meter reading. It's literally the law. It is in their rate schedule. They're not allowed to bill more or less than that because that's how tariffs work. And it is billing fraud, and it is a crime if they don't do that, and they charge me more or less because they didn't read my meter. And it's too many resources. I mean, how? But that's, the Exelon way. We don't care about customers. We just care about profits. He does appreciate the tone of my email, but he's hesitant to have Pepco personnel meet with me. Why would that be? Why would that be, Mr. Adeyemo? I mean, nobody will tell me because actually, Mr. Marisek and Mr. Daniels, I didn't even know this email existed until last week. Like October, November, December, January, February, March. 5 months later, I learned about this. 5 months later, actually almost to the day, because it was March 16th. And that was after the hearing officer issued an order dismissing my case based on the lie that Exelon has been telling the commission since March of 2025, claiming that I'm relying on data from my solar system. And the craziest part about all of that is the first thing that Aaron Ayler did when he was assigned to handle my case on October 2nd, 2024, was he called me and he said, Ms. Levinson, Pepco won't even respond if you're relying on data from your solar system. I said, don't worry, I am not. And I took that to heart and I did not rely on it ever. I later learned through a FOIA request that when he was assigned my case, Margaret Moskowitz called it my case was a first, and she has to be copied and included so she could follow it. But Aaron Ayler, for whatever reason, didn't do that. And then withheld Pepco's responses from me, and I had to escalate to Margaret Moskowitz in December before I got that stuff. So I don't know why Pepco personnel should not meet with me. And I also don't know why in October 2024, when I filed my complaint, Pepco just stripped out all the details of my complaint and told the billing back office to disable my interval meter readings and force through bills that didn't pass validation. And then then after they submitted their response to the commission that everybody withheld from me, 2 days later they issued a falsified October bill. When I complained about that, escalated investigations, sent it to the different engineering teams, but for some reason escalated investigations once again stripped out the details of my complaint and even told the engineers not to call me. So if anybody had bothered to call me in October 2024, this could have all been resolved. Instead, it is 18 months later, and Pepco's been lying ever since, and everybody's covering it up, and I still have no way to verify the accuracy of my Pepco bills, and Pepco is still manipulating them, and I don't even understand. So anyway, so I think I'm going to stop now because it has been, oh my god, 2 hours and 21 minutes. That's a long time to talk. And I don't even know how I talked that long. But that's how invested I am in this, because I know this stuff that cold. I don't have notes. I'm just talking to you about how ridiculous everything is. And hopefully that all recorded, and maybe I will record more later, or maybe I will actually sleep tonight instead of pulling another all-nighter trying to protect my rights when the entirety of the DC government is protecting Exelon's profits. Ciao, ciao for now.